Look, my lord, I'm not normally a religious man, but I've read so many crap David Bowie books in my life, and please, I just want one that's half decent at least. Well, it's at least worth a try, isn't it?
7 hours later.
Was that a bit harsh? I mean, between Paul Morley's self-indulgence, grammatical errors, and what can only be described as filler, does The Age of Bowie, How David Bowie Made a World of Difference actually stand up as a decent David Bowie biography? Hey demons, it's me, your boy, and I'm here to answer that exact question for you. No. David Bowie is an infamously difficult person to biograph the life of, mainly due to contradictions about his life floating around, or exaggerations and false stories offered by the man himself, when his impassive humour goes over the heads of biographers or journalists. Seriously, as somebody who has only read a few of the hundreds of books that have been published about this man over the course of his career, the amount of contradictions I have come across is staggering. But I'm going off topic. We're here to discuss why I really didn't care for this one in particular. So Morley decides to begin the book with a preface, where he describes pretty much nothing apart from how school textbooks in the 70s had a preface on them. Maybe it has some relevance to David Bowie, I'm really not sure. And then we move on to the introduction, which reads a lot more like a really long preface, with Morley going on and on and on about his own life, which then, 21 pages in, which with Morley's writing style feels more like about 50, we move on to chapter 1, which isn't about David Bowie at all, it's more about Paul Morley and his life. To be honest, he should have just got rid of the preface, got rid of the introduction, and just had chapter 1 as the introduction. Chapter 1 reads more like an introduction than the introduction. I'm just gonna warn you now, this book is not about David Bowie. It's 70% maybe about David Bowie at most. In fact, I think that's quite generous. It's probably about 50% about David Bowie, maybe not even that. I don't care about your life, Paul. Oh my god. He says he gave himself 10 weeks to write this book, right? Which was apparently the exact conditions that David Bowie had to write albums in the 1970s. First of all, Paul, you're not David Bowie. Second of all, I can tell that you only had 10 weeks to write this book because you seem to have completely skipped over the self-editing process. 3, I feel like it would have been so much easier for you to write this book in 10 weeks if you didn't spend the first 21 pages plus the preface gabbering on about your life. Also, page 22, we got Paul here talking about puberty. You develop a strange new way to satisfy some new unspecified physical cravings that you become addicted to, which result in an endless series of mini explosions. Nobody cares what you did with your dick as a teenager, Paul. Hell, what every teenager does with their dick. No one cares. Also, what relevance has he got with David Bowie? Within this first chapter as well, he makes a snide comment on how he thinks that streaming sites killed the album or some shit. Like, yes, while I agree that not as many people listen to full albums as they used to, you can still go to HMV and buy physical albums. They've actually brought back vinyl LP charts. Like, that's simple supply and demand equivalency. If people weren't buying and listening to full albums, you wouldn't be able to buy them anywhere except from specialist online retailers. People still listen to full albums. He's talking out of his ass. So the actual biography doesn't start until 69 pages in. 69. It seems like a very typical biography, you know, like all like the other gazillion ones about David Bowie that are out there. Except this one is written in the present tense. Obviously some kind of commentary on the omnipresence of Bowie. You know, he probably thought he was dead clever as he was writing that. However, before we get to that, we have an entire chapter which is just a load of single sentence paragraphs beginning with David Bowie is, which to begin with I thought was actually quite, you know, cool. But after a while, after that motif continues throughout the book, you start to think, okay, maybe he just wanted to fill up space. It really just feels like filler. A lot of them are saying nothing. It's pure filler. However, of course, like I said before, he tries to like have it in the present tense, but he keeps on having like flitting back to the past tense within like sentence clauses. So it's so disorientating to read because it flits from present tense back into past tense, obviously because he had no time to self-edit this, and I doubt this book was even edited at all. Like, oh my god. So after a couple of chapters which detail David Bowie's life from 1947 up till the year 1970, we run into this. Now this is written in a series of vignettes which aren't even strung together, which is how books are written when they're in the draft stages. This is like reading a first draft. It's so frustrating to read, but at least the whole section is probably one of the largest chunks of the book, and it's actually about David Bowie and not Paul Morley, so thank fuck for that. So once we have the little section about the year 1980 over, we have Paul talking about when he was the artistic director at the V&A David Bowie Is exhibit. And throughout this he mostly writes about his attempt to write a book in a weekend while sitting at the ticket desk. He writes of his encounters with Bowie fans. She asks me directly what it is about David Bowie. Then, why are you so interested? She had an accent that turns out to be part Polish, which makes her question sound a little sinister. That's a little bit racist, Paul. He talks about the entire exhibit as if he's too good for it, as if he's above it. Throughout this whole section he needs to take a fucking seat. He needs to take a row of seats. He needs to take an entire arena full of seats. He needs to take the entirety of Wembley Stadium plus Wembley Arena, all of those seats fucking combined. He also tries to act neutral towards the sort of... Apparently there's only two sorts of Bowie fans that exist. There's a load of sort of male fans who were teenagers in the 1970s who discovered him doing Starman on Top of the Pops. And there's a load of fans who are usually female and between the ages of 14 and 40 who discovered him through Jim Henson's Labyrinth. I get that this is him trying to say like, oh, these are the two where it's most closely connected to sexuality, but it really comes across as like those are the only two sorts of Bowie fans that exist and apparently no other ways of discovering him are actually present. He tries to act neutral towards these two sorts of fans, but he ends up coming across as really condescending towards the women that discovered him through Labyrinth, as if they're somehow lesser as fans than the boys who discovered him in the 1970s. So we've got page 390 I've made. Honestly, I've never had to make annotations in a book before because of how much I had to say about it. We have him talking about the two sorts of fans here. And he has to repeat it. Like, he's saying, oh, I think that there's the people who discovered him through Labyrinth are usually female and people that discovered him on Top of the Pops are usually male. He then goes on to say, yes, indeed, those who discovered Bowie in the early 70s tend to be male and those who discovered him through the Goblins tend to be female. You could have just said, the market research confirmed my beliefs as true, instead of writing all of that. He comes across as like a student who's trying to fill the fucking word count on an essay. I don't know if I've already said that in this review, but it bears repeating, honestly. We now move on to the final couple of chapters. Hooray! So we have chapter 9, which he only then starts to talk about how David Bowie made a world of difference. That's right, chapter 9, page 401. And even then, it was just really talking about, like, Bowie songs that inspired or like can correspond to certain bands. So the final chapter basically goes entirely from the 80s all the way through to the 21st century. Now, all that is condensed into one chapter. Of course, it doesn't go into very much detail at all. It's severely lacking in detail and also chronology. Like, I swear, at one point it's talking about his heart attack in 2004 and then like how he can move around like New York anonymously in like 2006, and then it cuts like back in time to the year 2000 and his daughter being born. Like, oh, it was really disorientating to read that. You're like, oh, I'm going back in time. Oh, fuck, Marty McFly. I mean, honestly, I wasn't expecting very much from this because I got it in like the bargain rack at HMV, like when I was buying some films. But it's low. Like, music journalism doesn't translate well into actual like novel length sort of pieces of writing, I don't think. And I'm not even a harsh critic. I have a personality type that likes most things. I go along with things. It's why I have such an eclectic taste. Like, I just go along with things. I like things that are pure crap because I just have a personality type that goes along with things and can just get with most things. But I just really didn't care for it. If you're looking actually for some decent books about David Bowie, I'd suggest that you go with, there's a new edition of this out now. I got this a few years ago. The Complete David Bowie by Nicholas Pegg, which is like an alphabetical like chronology of all of his songs pretty much, and that's really, if you want to have a book about David Bowie, you should buy that one. Or if you're looking more for a biography, I would suggest Strange Fascination by David Buckley, which, ironically enough, I actually bought at the David Bowie exhibit at the V&A when I was 14. But that's probably the better option if you're looking for an actual biography of David Bowie. In the end, I gave this book, I never give anything this, I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. Because I never give anything that low, but I just wish, you know, that it had actually been a decent representation of David Bowie, but it was really boring and there was so much filler and his writing style was so frustrating to read. Like, I ended up skipping over like massive paragraphs because somehow he has this talent of writing so much yet saying so little. Anyway guys, I want you to all be good to yourselves and I will see you all very soon.